This is a wrestling match that somehow turned into a battle on a rooftop. One wrong move, and somebody is going over the edge. Hulk Hogan versus the Giant. The two are inside two supercharged monster trucks, welded together, pushing each other outside a 100-foot circle off the top of Cobo Hall, a 5-story building. The Giant loses control, steps out of his truck, walks toward Hogan, and moments later, he falls off the building. At least, that's what the world saw. But this insane stunt would go on to birth one of the strangest crossovers in sports history, one where wrestling characters became monster trucks. Back in 1995, wrestling was all about spectacle. Bigger fights, bigger drama, bigger personalities. Everything was just bigger. But WCW wanted to try out something different. That's how the Halloween Havoc Monster Truck Sumo match was born. The rules were simple. 2 trucks, 1 circle. Push the other guy out. The match took place on the roof of Cobo Hall in Detroit. As for the trucks, they weren't props. Each truck had around 1,500 horsepower, 4 66-inch tires weighing nearly 1,000 pounds each, and their bumpers were welded together. This stunt did something WCW didn't expect. The fans loved the match just as much as they loved the trucks. And that one reaction would kick off an entire era where wrestling characters were turned into monster trucks. With that said, it wasn't as simple as painting logos on the truck. Behind all this, there was a hidden mastermind. Because building a monster truck that can perform isn't quite an easy task. At the time, Bigfoot was the gold standard of the entire industry. And the man behind it all, Bob Chandler, the father of the sport. So when WCW wanted real machines, they went straight to the best. The trucks used in that rooftop match were real Bigfoot chassis, just running different body styles. And that's what made it so convincing. Because to the audience, it didn't feel like a stunt. The partnership with Bigfoot made it feel real. And that realism created a new idea inside WCW. What if these trucks didn't just show up once? What if they became part of the show? That idea would lead to a fleet of wrestling-themed monster trucks. After the success of the 1995 Halloween Havoc, WCW didn't slow down. They doubled down. And in the late 1990s and early 2000s, instead of one-offs, they created an entire lineup of monster trucks based on some of their biggest stars. Among them were heroes, villains, and outlaws, just like the wrestlers. And leading the charge was one of the most iconic factions in wrestling history, the NWO. It was the villain, blacked out with graffiti-style logos. In wrestling, the NWO was about taking over, replacing the old guard, and the truck followed that same story. In fact, the NWO truck was formerly Taurus 4, which at that time was Tom Ment's bulldozer. The truck debuted in San Antonio on January 15, 2000. As was the theme of the truck, the driver was never advertised during any of its shows, with Chad Fortune, who later drove Superman and Soldier Fortune, acting as the truck's spokesman, interrupting any reporter who attempted to interview the driver. NWO's chassis would be converted into Lupe Souza's El Toro Loco. But the most dominant of them all was Goldberg. Bill Goldberg was unstoppable, and WCW wanted his truck to feel the same way. So when the Goldberg monster truck debuted at the Georgia Dome in Atlanta, Georgia, the home of Bill Goldberg and WCW, on January 8, 2000, Goldberg himself made a special appearance to announce the debut of the truck. The keys were handed over to one of the best drivers in the sport, Tom Mentz. If you know monster trucks, you know that name. He has built a reputation for pushing trucks far beyond their limit, sometimes going as far as doing moves that weren't even common yet. And it paid off. He won the first ever Monster Jam World Finals Racing Championship in 2000, then followed it up with a Freestyle Championship in 2001. And when WCW collapsed in 2001, the Goldberg truck was rebranded to Team Mentz, before becoming Maximum Destruction, or Max D, one of the most dominant trucks in Monster Jam history. By the early 2000s, everything changed. WCW was gone, and with it, the monster trucks. The NWO's chassis would be converted into El Toro Loco, with Lupe Souza behind the wheel. And as for the Sting truck, at the time of its debut on February 18, 2000, the truck was the fifth and final WCW-sponsored truck to be created. The truck was later invited to compete in World Finals 1, where it is best remembered for its body flying off during the first hit in freestyle. The truck competed at its final event at World Finals 2, with Farrell performing a wild and destructive freestyle. During that same event, the truck was parked in a corner of the stadium after its freestyle. Rage and Steel would then come out for its freestyle, hit a few obstacles, blowing his left front and rear tire. Then, intentionally or not, it would go on to drive on a parked Sting, completely destroying its body. 2 days after the World Finals, WCW would go out of business, resulting in Sting being retired afterward. The truck would be refurbished and converted into Vet King. However, this was not the first Sting monster truck. From 1997 to 1998, Bigfoot 4x4 ran their own version of Sting. And as for the Nitro Machine, it was the first of the 5 WCW-sponsored trucks to debut, and during its lifespan, due to the simple design of the truck, it was often used as a platform for rookies and less experienced drivers, and would continue to be so until the late 2000s under a different name. But for now, it would also be used for displays at certain USHRA events, such as the first Houston show of the 2001 season and World Finals 2. After WCW collapsed, it tried to survive. But without the show, and the hype that came with it, the truck didn't last. The truck would later be converted into Inferno. Here's the truth about monster trucks most people don't realize. The body doesn't really matter. The chassis does. These trucks are constantly being reused. The same machine that once represented a wrestling legend could come back years later as something completely different, and nobody would even know. So while these trucks disappeared, in reality, they are still out there, just wearing different skins. But there was one WCW truck that refused to disappear. Madusa. Of all the wrestling-themed trucks, Madusa was the only one to actually be driven by its namesake, debuting on January 7th, 2000. While every other WCW truck vanished, Madusa stayed, and the reason why comes down to its ownership. Unlike the others, Deborah Michelli owned the rights to her wrestling name and alias, Madusa. So, when WCW collapsed, nobody could take the truck away from her. And while other trucks were forced to rebrand or disappear, Madusa kept going, year after year, competing at World Finals. She became one of the first female drivers to truly break through in the sport, with 2 world championships to show for it, even going as far as attempting backflips in an age when they were thought of as impossible, building a legacy that outlasted the entire WCW era before retiring in 2016, 16 years after its debut.